Hey, what's up everybody? BDF 44 coming at you with another video. Alright, so I figured I'd do a therapy session. It's 6 in the morning. Feel pretty good. No complaints at all. Did a nice little playlist last night before I went to bed. Very happy with how that turned out. You know, just staying as consistent as I can. So I guess on this therapy session, I know that this is a topic that's kind of circling around the NBA a little bit because of Anthony Edwards. You know, he made a couple of derogatory statements on camera as he was filming some individuals across the street from him from within his car. You know, he was just looking at some guys, man, who appeared to be from the LGBTQ community. They appeared to be guys who were just kind of hugging and they had their shirts off, I guess. Buff white guys, that kind of thing. And you know, Anthony Edwards, I guess he was in a car with his girlfriend or a lady. You could hear her voice. And he was saying, look at these queer ends, man. This is what the world has come to. And so in his mind, that was like, you know, a decent, I guess, opinion. But my thing is, if you're gonna let yourself be seen speaking that way, you gotta understand that there's gonna be repercussions in this era. You know, even for a young guy like Anthony Edwards, he grew up in this era, so he should be very aware. I would give him more of an less of a pass, to be honest with you, for what would offend others than maybe some of the older people that came before him, because they're from a world where people weren't getting canceled. They're from a world where people used to say all kinds of different things about people who weren't like them, and used to treat people different. I mean, it was understood that treating people different was not exactly shunned in a lot of ways for being different and etc. So that's not where we are. That's not the world he was raised in. And I really don't know why he thought that would be a good idea to let that be uploaded or to upload that himself. But, you know, I think most people understand that this is a young fella, very young fella. He was drafted 2 years ago. Probably ain't even 22 years old. He has a lot of growing up to do. It's the rest of us who are at that age, you know. And I tell you, if you take some things from who I was at 22 and you apply them today, you probably have every right to reprimand me for thoughts and cancel me or whatever. I'm pretty sure I've done and said some things that just were not right, period. And I won't you know, exalt myself as better than anyone when I do videos like these. I just won't. But what I can say is you live and you learn, you grow, you understand the importance of respecting that even though somebody's lifestyle may be different than yours, that you too have a lifestyle that's different than somebody else. And you want to be at least left alone, if nothing else. A lot of us want to be accepted. A lot of us want to be appreciated. A lot of us want to be understood. But if nothing else, you want to not be attacked. And I think that that's what you grow to understand, regardless of what you think about people's lifestyle. You need to respect that they have their own lifestyle and that that's not your lifestyle, and that you are wrong for jumping into that world and spreading your negativity and spreading your message about how they're living. In my humble opinion, it's wrong. You can feel whatever you feel. I feel whatever I feel. But once I let those feelings be known, now I'm asking for a reaction. Now I'm asking to instill a certain feeling in others. And if that feeling ain't going to inspire a goodness, if that feeling ain't going to inspire something that's going to make them feel better, then you're just part of the problem in this world, regardless of what your opinion is or what subject it is we're talking about. Engaging in the right energy will ultimately bring you back the right consequences. His pockets were touched because he did not engage in the right energy. Whatever the subject matter is, whatever the group you're pointed at, if you're throwing hate at people, it's going to come back at you in a way or another. And that's what the NBA did to him. They fined him $40,000. I think they could have fined him double that if they really wanted to be honest with you. Just from the era that we're in, the times that we're in, the importance of identity, the importance of trusting one another to kind of uphold each other's respect level in the presence of just the open wide public. Everybody's holding the camera. Everybody's responsible to a degree for what everybody else is seeing when that's the case. So I look at it like this. I was raised in a household where my mother respected people who were different in that way, but she was not someone who celebrated that behavior, that energy. I did not side with her on that. I don't. And we had some really, really important conversations before she passed away that kind of established my difference in how I view the world. And plus, again, I'm from a different generation, so it's important that I do in order for me to get along with the people who may be around me. And she raised me to respect that. You know, even though I had a difference of opinion of her, she also raised me to have that difference in opinion, a certain level of compassion, a certain level of acceptance, a certain level of appreciation and love that would even disagree with her at times. You know what I mean? She loved people, but she kept them at a certain distance, and she raised me to keep them at a certain distance as well. And that's just the reality of the situation. Now, luckily enough, and I say luckily with a respect to others and a respect to myself, luckily enough, I am who I am, and I didn't have struggles in that way that would make it so that my mom and I would not get along. But I think if I was wired a certain way, she probably wouldn't approve of my behavior. She probably would not have been the type of mom that I would have needed her to be to have my mental health be where it needs to be. And I'm not certain of that. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you guys that's 100% the case. But based on certain conversations that me and my mom had, I just feel like if I would have come home with an alternative mindset than I do in that regard, it'd have been a problem. It'd have been a complete problem. And that's just the reality of how I was raised. So I understand the mentality of those who were raised in a village where that energy wasn't respected like it's appreciated today. And it has religious and spiritual backings to it in a lot of cases. But let me tell you what I've come to when I dug deep into my own spirit and thought about these things. If I pride myself on being somebody who truly follows Jesus, because that's my thing, then I got to understand that Jesus accepted people that the world around him did not accept. The norms of the world around him did not accept some of his friends. And he still spoke to them. He still broke bread with them. All of these different things he shared with them. He walked with them. He moved with those type of people. Now, some would say, especially those without faith, they would say it's probably why he passed away so soon. But I would say those who have faith understand that that's not how that actually went. The faith that I share, that is. But whether or not you believe in the story or not, you understand that I believe it. And because of that, I have to follow that mentality, not necessarily the mentality of the world that tends to shun people for differences or ostracize people for things that they think God doesn't respect. God didn't give me the information to know for certain how he wants me to react to what it is that I may feel he doesn't respect. Because he didn't put me on this earth to be God. He put me on this earth to be man. And because of the flaws that I inherit just by nature of man, that always keeps me honest to understand that I may not have your set of circumstances, but I got my own that I need to work on. So if I'm looking at your circumstances and saying you need to work on yours, I always look at mine first and say, let me fix mine first. And maybe in fixing mine, I might be looking at yours the right way once I do. But until I get to that point where my life is fixed, I might not actually even be viewing you properly because of it. And that is something I've also learned as well. You can't figure that out in 22 years. You can't come to those type of conclusions in 22 years. A lot of people don't come to those conclusions at all. And that's the point of me making this video. Anthony Edwards going to have to come to his own conclusions. I think what I saw in him in that car was him showing what his norms were from the world that he's in. The same norms that I come from, the world that I'm in, or was in, where you looked at those guys across the street and you said, what has the world come to? And I think they look across the street and see you and say, What has the world come to? Where they can't stand across the street, mind their own business, be themselves, and not get harassed by someone that they would otherwise root for on a basketball floor. And that's an important thing that Anthony needs to understand. A lot of the people in them stands is rooting for you. Those are them guys there too. They rooting for you hard as anybody else, fam. And the most important thing we all got to understand, and this is what I always say about people who are stuck in their mindset today and believe in what it is that they believe in and their groups believe in, and they all together and they stand together and they agree. Here's the problem. You don't know what comes next. You may have a child, and that child may be a part of that group. You may have a brother, and you don't know he's a part of that group because he's hiding it from you because of this mentality that you may have. You got business partners who may be a part of that group who are not going to give you any deals because of how you approached this situation back when you were 22 years old. This is going to follow Anthony Edwards for the rest of his life. Just like anybody else who says anything negative about that community. It don't go away, buddy. It don't go away. And so that's unfortunate. But at the end of the day, just like I said, he's 22 years old. And he has to come to certain conclusions on his own that he hasn't had the time nor the maturity to come to. Now, is he going to change his mind once he comes to those conclusions? A lot do not. A lot do not. But what we have to understand is that at 22 years old, he hasn't even begun to ask the questions yet, most of the time. A lot of times, 22 years old, he don't even know who he is yet. And that's the reality of a lot of people's lives. I look at what Lamar Odom is going through in his life and how people are reacting to his choices. I, too, looked at that situation differently based on how I'm wired. Shocked me a little bit, took me aback. But I respect and support him and whatever it is he's trying to do in finding happiness. And I don't back up any rumors in regards to his love life. I'm not making any assumptions just because a man was seen or pictured or any. I don't want people thinking that just because you see me pictured with somebody or necessarily talking to somebody or standing next to somebody or even hugging somebody that I'm dating somebody or that I've been encountered with them. Because I can tell you it's been a million times where that has not been the case. Okay? Pictures that I've taken with people that you may say, oh, there's some energy there. No, it's not. I had somebody tell me that about a picture I took with my sister. Okay? Like, ooh, who's that cute girl next to you? It's my sister. Okay? So that's not something I subscribe to. However, at the end of the day, whatever he chooses to do, that's just one man, that's his business. And I think people having an opinion about it is just something that we discard just like any other opinion. I don't sit here and listen to people who say, oh, he's a bad guy, or what the world come to, all that. I don't care that much at all, but I think it's relevant to the conversation because we speak of someone who may have found themselves later in life in this way, you know. If you would have talked to Lamar at 22, maybe he would have said something similar to what Anthony Edwards said. You talk to him now, he has an entirely different conversation for you. It's just that's the relevance of the statement, I think. And people don't know who they are, but they listen to what everybody else tell them. They listen to what their parents grew up to teach them, and they just go out into the world and assume the world is what it is until they learn it's not, and then they got to unlearn all the nonsense. Anthony Edwards is just one of a million people like that. He has to unlearn some stuff, come to his own conclusions, and that's just part of living. It's literally part of living, and that's kind of why I'm glad they only fined him $40,000. Now, if this came from Chris Paul or somebody like that, you're an established human being. You know better. You've been on this earth long enough to know that certain things are not respectable, and if you take a stance like that, that means you intended to. You know what I mean? So that's how I look at it. It's different. But somebody 22 years of age, I doubt that's the case in a lot of cases. A good majority of 22-year-olds just saying they ain't there yet in regards to that type of thinking. They're not there yet. So, Anthony's got some growing up to do, man. And God is funny, man. I'm not speaking this on nobody, but he's funny. You mess around and have a gay kid, bro. You will mess around and have, that type of stuff be happening to people like this. Where they have this mentality like, oh, that's so wrong, it's so wrong. And then you look up and you are forced by sheer nature to face that demon. And either you're going to be accepting of the people that you loved or not. But that is something that crosses a lot of people's lives when they have a certain distance that they keep between themselves and that community. Something I've seen. So we'll see how it plays out, man. We'll see how it plays out. But you know, I got support for everybody. You guys, if you go back enough in my videos in the past, you will see conversations where I've talked about where I wasn't comfortable in situations. I felt like, you know, I've been on different spectrums of this. I've had conversations on this camera where I told you guys I didn't feel comfortable around gay folks anymore because of how I was being treated by a certain gay person. You know, there's a lot of different phases that I've gone through. But at the end of the day, when I tell you that I accept people for who they are, that I don't want to be put in a box with others just because of my skin color or because of the attributes of people who share my skin color. So I wouldn't want to put others in boxes just because of an experience I may have had that went negative with a certain type of person. That's the absolute wrong way to approach human beings. In my opinion, after 38 years of life, I just don't share that mentality. I'm comfortable around humans who are comfortable around me. And if you happen to fall in line with a certain mentality or you fit in a certain quote unquote box, it's going to be the discipline to keep you out of that box in my mind from here on out. I don't want to put people in boxes no more because I certainly don't want to be in one myself. So that's just what it is, man. I think there's a lot of understanding to be had. You know, the word gay, so to speak, is not even politically correct anymore. There's so many different aspects of different mindsets, different levels or whatever, however best to go about it. And I'm understanding of that. We're still growing in our understanding, and I think that's part of it. And as we continue to learn people and people turn to learn themselves, we'll learn how best to respect people and how best to accept the differences in them while respecting ourselves in the process, you know, and that's the balance. I think there needs to be a real open and mature conversation about how peculiar the that's the wrong way of putting it, the practices may be to people who consider themselves straight in some cases. And I ain't gonna say all, because that's putting people in boxes as well. Not every straight person sees alternate lifestyles as something peculiar. But I think as we learn to grow to respect one another, the conversation needs to be had about that, about how people are uncomfortable in certain cases, how we make others uncomfortable with how uncomfortable we may be in certain cases, and how best to smooth all of it out so we can have a better world amongst us in spite of all these different things. I think we're in a space where we want to force everybody to be comfortable, but that's not how comfort is found. You know, I'm about the organic energy of things. I'm about understanding things, and sometimes having difficult conversations will help us break down what's really between us. And I think that's what needs to happen. I don't want to be in a world where I have to lie to myself and say I'm comfortable with something that I'm not. I want to get to a point where I can sit down and say, how do I get to a point where I'm comfortable with this? If I'm lying to myself and telling myself I'm comfortable with something that I'm not comfortable seeing just to assimilate with the rest of the world, I'm going to hurt my mental health. That's exactly what I end up doing. And it's not limited to sex at all. The subject could be something even more worse. It could be worse. You know, my mind, the way I fathom it, we could have a whole scenario, a world where the content that's acceptable is desensitized content. Like the world has us watching nothing but faces of death all day. That's bad for my mental health. Now, just because all of y'all agree with that and think that that's normal and your kids was raised to see that guts and glory and all that nonsense, me personally, in my mindset, I'm not wired for that. I don't want to see that all day. I'm not going to be able to function properly if I'm watching death all day long. So regardless of what y'all agree with, regardless of what y'all on, I got to protect my mental health. And if we can't have conversations such as that about this subject, then we're not truly getting to the crux of what would ultimately inspire change within those who may be homophobic, as well as those who may be quick to label those who are uncomfortable as homophobic. If we're going to get to a point where we're really together, we got to talk about how uncomfortable both sides may feel in the presence of one another. And we can get there. That's what I'm about. I'm not about pouring a rug over problems. I don't want to pull a rug over problems because I know that all that does is create more problems in the future. If we're going to fix our problems, we need to show our kids how to fix their problems. If we're going to truly do it, we need to do it right. Not like our forefathers did it, where they pretended things were not as they were and then treated people as if they weren't. They told lies about what it is their intentions were. You know, for example, the Constitution. Everybody was, you know, supposed to be created equal, and it's a world where men are created equal except for black men and men of color and anybody else who wasn't white. Like, they didn't tell the truth about what their intentions was. They just lied about it, and it didn't inspire any healing. That's not what I'm on. That's not what I've learned. What I've learned is to not do things that way, to do the opposite of what they did, to break down exactly what's wrong, to have the uncomfortable conversations, to rip the Band-Aid off and scratch at the damn thing if that's what it's going to take to help us. Because at the end of the day, as long as we continue to pretend like we're getting along, all we're doing is putting enough pressure against us to where eventually it's going to boil over, just like any other situation socially. So let's have the other conversation. Let's have the other conversation. And I don't know if I'm ready to initiate that conversation, because it's going to speak of things that will offend. But those things are things that are meant to break down the barriers that ultimately stay in between people who are different. I think I picture, and it's simply in my head, I picture a person on the other side of the equation in the community who doesn't believe at all that I have any desire to accept them truthfully. You understand what I'm saying? They believe that I'll do it in the forefront. Yeah, I love them. They're great. Let's go to the parade. Let's do all this. But in the background, they think I'm really sitting here like, man, I still think negatively of them. What I'm telling you is, I'm going to unlearn that, bros and sis. I'm going to unlearn that. We're going to work together to unlearn that. We're not going to pretend to accept one another. We're going to figure out why the acceptance isn't there, and we're going to fix it. We're going to literally fix it. You understand what I'm saying? That's what we're about. That's how you inspire change. And then, once you change yourself, once you start getting through to what it is that makes you feel uncomfortable about certain things, then you can start understanding why it's important to re-examine how you view others, how you view yourself, how you view yourself to be seen in the presence of others, how you allow yourself to be seen when you speak of others, and these type of things. Start with the agreements before you leave the house. As we always talk about these days, it's the agreements you make before you leave the house. You know what I mean? So that's what it's about. I ain't gonna sit up here and say that I'm comfortable at all. I'm sitting here saying I'm not, but I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there because we're gonna figure out exactly how we can get there. That's what it's about. So, you know, I support my brothers and sisters and everybody in ultimate lifestyles that don't share mentality with me, don't share urges and desires as I do. I think we all have a responsibility to ourselves and to our world to have some hold on our sexual nature. You got to have some hold on it. Now, what your threshold is, what having a hold of it actually means in your world, I would never assume to define that for you. But what I'm saying is, once people let it get out of hand, it can affect your decision making, regardless of what group you're in. Straight, LGBTQ, something else that I've never heard of. If you let it get out of hand, it'll affect your decision making. You will stay in bad situations because you want to get that done. You will betray people you had no business betraying because you want to satisfy those desires. You will let your mental health go completely out of whack trying to satisfy those desires. You will find yourself doing things, life things, to protect against those desires or being exposed or whatever. All of that is unnecessary. All of that is unnecessary. I think it comes down to knowing exactly where the balance is for you. Once it becomes imbalanced, once it becomes too much, and you start making moves that otherwise ruin your life because you're trying to satisfy that aspect of your life, there needs to be something that brings you back to a space of balance. That's what I found in my own walk. You know what I mean? It's just like, look, when you're not living right in that way, it will harm you in some other ways. And I think a lot of people already have seen that multiple times in their life who probably watching me right now. But to reiterate what we already know is important, because you may still face it going forward. With all your heart and might, try your very best to find balance sexually. All right? And that's a separate conversation than what we're talking about, but I felt it was necessary to throw it in there. Find that balance, man. So that's what I got to say. That is my therapy session for today. It's the Kobe hour. I got a lot of respect for everybody, man. And I'm learning to become more comfortable in my opinions, and then from there we can help together mold the opinions that I have to kind of fit the world that I'm in, and unlearn some things that need to be unlearned so that comfort can be found in my own skin and in the presence of others who may be comfortable in their own skin. That's important. So that's what I got to say, man. My name is BDF 44. I thank you all for watching.